Well, here it lies, like a cadaver on a mortuary slab. Or maybe like Frankenstein's monster in the laboratory, waiting to spring back to life. Now, after what you've seen in the last episode, it was probably looked like that was as far as I could take it with stripping down the chassis, but not quite as it turns out. There's a little bit left to go. Let me show you. Here, on the two remaining outriggers that I thought, well, here you can see what I thought was expertly applied weld was actually just expertly applied filler and paint. So the two remaining outriggers, these two, are also going to have to come off and be rectified and put back on, just like all the other ones. There's a couple of other bits as well that the blasting showed up as being a bit thin, where I'm going to have to cut out and let new metal in. But not just yet, because today I feel like putting something back on there. So I'm going to start with these slots that I cut into the chassis so I could get the blaster in. That material is perfectly fine, so I'm going to weld that back on. So because I got impatient when I cut these holes out and I used the big grinder, I've got quite a gap around the edge here. Normally I'd cut them out using one of these little slitting discs in the small grinder. It's not really an issue, but it's going to make it a lot slower to weld this up because I'm having to stitch weld it rather than do a continual run, but well, we'll get there. That's the first one on then, and you can see the welding's not as tidy as I'd like it to be doing it this way. You can see there there's the individual stitch welds, but of course it's all going to be ground back, so it's a moot point really. I'll clean that up in a mo, but first I'm going to do these ones. I've got another 3 here. So incidentally, you might be wondering why I'm going at it with the grinder, with the grinding disc, rather than say a flap wheel, straight on it with a flap wheel or a sanding pad. There's a reason. I'll try and explain because it's quite fundamental. We've got the surface there, and this was something I was taught very early on, very long time ago, when I first started doing this sort of thing, well, being paid for it. So if we're looking, say, side on at the chassis, and this is the top of it, and this is the weld bead here, this protrusion. Now, if I bring in this, which is an 80 grit disc, or even if that's a 60 grit disc, and I come in at it like that, the disc, being flexible, will go over. So it'll dip into this metal and to this metal, as well as smoothing off the top. And that's not what I'm trying to achieve. So what I want to do, leave all that there, is take that bit and bring it down level with that. I don't want it to dip in here and here. I want it all to be smooth. So that's why I use this, the grinding disc, and I attack the top of it there, and I bring that down level, and I'll come at it with the edge of the disc or at an angle, whatever I need to flatten it off. Once it's flat, it then looks like this. So this was where the weld seam was, here and here, and there's not really any trace of it, but obviously this is all covered in scratches. So once I'm at this point, that's when I use the sanding disc and take it off. And the same thing would happen if I used a flap wheel. It would coast over the bead, it would dip in over the bead and then down again. It would smooth it off, but it wouldn't get what I'm after with this. So that's my tip of the day. I'm sure plenty of you already knew that. I'm sure plenty of you do it completely differently, and that's fine too. Next I'm going to go and retrieve the other bits. So I've got 1, 2, 3, yes, 3. These 3 I think were solid when I cut them out, so hopefully they're somewhere outside. This is nearly all scrap. So it's just a reminder of what's come off of the pork reset. These I got to rebuild. Now that's off of one of those cross members. Yeah, that way around. Okay, got one then. That one. Yeah. Here is a repair piece that I left in place, and you can probably see why, because I cut out this bit here on this side, I cut out this whole section here from the underneath, and this section here on top. There's almost nothing left as it is. So I figured if I took this piece out, it would fold up. So what I'm going to do now is just weld a temporary brace across here, and then cut out this section, and then sort out this top bit here. This is just a piece of scrap, and this is just the length it was in the scrap pile. worked my way around this, being careful not to pump too much heat into any one section at a time, and while I was letting it cool down I was sorting that bit out as well, and that bit up there. Not sure if it was apparent on camera from the angle I had it at, but this is just a piece of scrap. I think I use this for making the handles for candle holders or something along those lines. Anyway, turned out to be just the right size, plonk on there and weld in. As far as I can tell, and I've tried hammering them, it seems to be very local corrosion here. So in other words, the metal around these holes is pretty sound. So I'm going to try cutting out small holes, just there and there. And while I'm at it, you can see there's a hole in here that's not supposed to be here. So I'll take this plate off, it's going to be the easiest thing to do here. Yep, all the surrounding metal there is absolutely fine. And if I flatten those out a bit, I can actually use them as templates. So that's all good. This piece is actually quite a bit thicker than the chassis material. Yeah, it's more like 3mm than just over 2 for that. Yeah, 3mm. Okay. So I've got some out somewhere. So I'll clean this lot up in a minute, but first I'm going to take this off. I think I will reuse the outriggers. They look to be okay, at least at the moment, but obviously they've got to be remounted. Currently the chassis, or the back end of it, is actually sat on the outriggers, so I'm going to have to chop it up first before cutting them off. So it's just that this area here is really thin. Obviously the top bit was the repair section. I'll make up something on there. While this lot cools down, I'm going to chop the other outrigger off from that side. Let's have some before footage then. quite happy with that so far. Let me show you a close-up. Bearing in mind the dumb irons still need to go on. Other than that, the whole of the top of the chassis is done up to here. So that's next, which is these. And you can see, so these are where the rear shock absorbers mount onto. And as you can see, these have been repaired so many times that they're completely knackered. I think I can probably reuse this bit here. But this will have to be replaced because this is a tube. This is where the mounting bolt goes through, and then the nut goes on there. But that's completely corroded inside, and that one's not much better. I think there's just about enough material left to figure out what it's supposed to look like and make a new one, or a pair of new ones. So I don't have any tubing of this exact dimension. It's 3/4 inch or 19mm externally, with a roughly 11.5mm hole in the middle. I do, however, have some 20 round, and in the corner of the workshop over there I have an old lathe. Now, of course, what I've just cut is mild steel, but then I've got no reason to assume that this isn't mild steel here. So, and as I'm going to be machining this, mild steel is what I'm going to go with. So over to the lathe next. First job is to face off the ends and make them nice and square. Centre drill, I have a centre drill, I'm sure. There we go. So that started us off. Now let's just go to working up. Start with a 6. And start again. And there it is. Not the best bit of machining you're ever going to see, but considering the state of the lathe and its operator, I'm quite happy with that. I'll get this one sorted as well, and see you back at the bench. That's 2 of those made up. Next stage is to try and liberate this bit here and see if I can reuse that bit rather than having to make one up. Splendid, that's rescued that then. And this, obviously won't, that's what I didn't do. I've got to turn down the outside of this, haven't I? So yes, I'll do that. The other bits, well, there's nothing else salvageable from here, but I can use this one here as a template to make up the end pieces. So I'll need 4 of those. 63. What we've got that's anywhere near that then. There we go. It's a lump of 4mm steel, which is exactly the right. Cool. So with those sorted, I think the last bit before I can stick it on the chassis is to radius these edges slightly. So I'll do that on the belt sander. So you can see there it's fully welded on. Now I've got to cut it back. And there it is now. It's nice and flush. But there was a big groove cut in the back of this bush, so that most of that weld has disappeared down there, and I've only just tidied it up. So I can't resist a flyby close-up of the before and after. This is one of those silly little things that no one's ever going to see, well, apart from you people watching. But yes, to me it actually makes all the difference. That's taken something that's completely shagged and rebuilt it, and even reused a tiny bit. So once I've finished patting myself on the back, I shall sort this one out as well, and we'll get them welded up onto the chassis. You can probably already tell the intended construction of these mounts is for the straps here on the side of the chassis, the reinforcing straps, to actually be part of the mount. And of course I've just cut them off. I've done that because these straps are absolutely fine, there's no point chopping those off. And I'm going to now weld it from both sides, weld the new part on from both sides, from here and from behind. And that's going to achieve full penetration of the welder, and I'm completely confident that's all going to be diggity boom. Pretty convincing, I think. Push it considering what I had to work with. So these bits here and here, it's like shroud, don't think that's supposed to be there. So I've checked a new chassis and it shows it to be like this, which is why I've made that like that. And around here, I've got the same on this side. So with those sorted, that's it for the top of the chassis, apart from the dumb irons on that end and the rear cross member on that end. So now I need to flip it over and sort out the bottom of the chassis. Also, I've got to check for alignment. Got to check that I've not put in too much distortion, any twisting. It wasn't terribly straight to begin with. So I'll check the alignment next. I'll see you back here for that. Cheers for now.